Good evening. Well, okay. Things seem to be working finally, and so I will start talking. The biggest thing to happen in the Jungian world, probably at least since 2009, when the Red Book was issued, is the fact that the Korean K-pop band BTS is just about to release an album entitled Map of the Soul, Personna, which is based on Jungian analyst Murray Stein's 1998 book, Jung's Map of the Soul, An Introduction. And so it's a very exciting development because it means that BTS's 80 million followers are going to be exposed to Dr. Jung's work. And I looked at the lyrics of the promo song that they've put out, and certainly it is Jungian material. So something is going to happen. And if you can hear me and see me, please say so on the chat, because I'm getting a message saying that I have a really bad stream health, bad, potentially serious viewing issues is what it says. And so if you can see me, that would be great. If you don't see me, then we have a problem. And why is this saying the stream is... Somehow this... okay, if you can still hear me, this screen that I'm looking at says that the stream ended 57 seconds ago. And Reezy Robin Fine says, I'm really interested to learn more about his work. BTS was my introduction to Dr. Jung. Terrific. Okay, I can see you too. Thank you, Reezy. Now, this evening, I'm feeling a bit ill, but I did make a video yesterday with BTS AHC project, and in that video I covered a lot of the main issues of Dr. Jung's work, or some of the main issues anyway, some of the biggest ones: the structure of the soul and introduction to his views about religion. And that video is currently uploading. It is 68% complete right now, and I've put the link for it. Let me see if I have the link. Okay, here's the link for it. Whoops, tricky sometimes. These guys are slippery. Okay, so this is the link to the new video, which I edited today, and which has good material about the basic ideas of Jung. And I worked very hard on this video today, and yesterday I also worked hard on the video for on individuation that applies to BTS as well. And both of those videos are on the homepage of this channel. And so what I'm going to do here is talk a little bit about what's happening with BTS. And I see I'm getting a lot of new subscribers, or at least viewers, so that's terrific. So I'm going to, usually what we do is we talk about something very detailed and Jungian, but tonight I want to talk about what's happening with BTS, because that's such a big issue. And because I've been quite sick since last Thursday, I'm going to make this a shorter than usual session. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have and you may want to put on the chat. I'll watch for them and we'll discuss them. And I'll tell you what I know about BTS. Now, what I know about BTS is that those were 7 young men in Korea who basically lived on their own, living together from the time that they were in their mid-teens. The older ones are now 24. And what happens when you're forced out, when you're forced to live on your own, you could think of it as like a mother bear. Mother bear does everything for their kids for 2 years. And after 2 years, one fine day, she turns around to the 2 cubs and gives them a big growl and says, "Get lost, you're on your own now." And so that sort of thing, one way or another, can happen to a lot of us. Many people around the world have had to make their way from the time they were in their mid-teens. I know several that are like that. And when that happens, it causes you to mature much faster than if you just go through a normal life and go to high school and college and all that. And so in the old days, 50 years ago, that's not real old, but it's before Dr. Young died, people used to think that his work wasn't suitable for you until you hit your midlife crisis. And famous Jungian analyst James Hillman once said on an audio tape that I listened to, "Can't we find a defeat in here somewhere?" And what he meant by that ironic comment is that Jungian analysts look for a defeat. You have to have a defeat before you're very interesting to a Jungian analyst, because then they can help you figure out what you're doing wrong. And so the key is that we have to get through these defeats. And there's a famous archetype, which we call the Job archetype, which is contest. I'm going to put it on the chat here. Defeat, lamentation, rebirth. And believe it or not, you have to go through that cycle many times in your lifetime in order to develop a strong ego so that you can face the slings and arrows of life. Otherwise, if you don't develop a strong ego, then basically you just crawl off in a corner and gradually you perish. And this is called the Job archetype in Jungian psychology. So it means that you have to be prepared to make mistakes. And when I had employees in various places, including in Japan, I would always ask, I would always ask people, what's the biggest mistake you ever made? And most people are very uncomfortable by that question. But if they said some little teeny mistake, then I knew they were lying, or that I knew that they were not very mature, because mature people know that you have to come through mistakes and weather those mistakes. And so think of it like The Voice, the program The Voice, where everybody thinks they can be a rock star, but really most of us can't. But they give everybody a chance. And so people come in and they contest on The Voice. Most are defeated. So you have the second stage of this Job archetype. Then you lament about the fact that you can't make it as a rock star. And then you are reborn because you're psyche tells you the next thing you should do, whatever that is. There's no specific thing, and it will be different for every culture. But your psyche will tell you to go forward, and here's what you should do. And you should listen to that. That's your self telling you your next step. And you should go through that cycle as many times as you can in your lifetime. Hello, Info Overdose. Nice to see you. Info says, I'm going to attempt to read Archetypes of the Collective Unconscious back to back tomorrow. Well, I wish you very good luck on that. That would be a crushing thing for your psyche if you can get through it. I think you'll probably bounce off at some point. But anyway, Jungian psychology has to be taken in small doses, and it has to be reread multiple times in order to really grok what the man was saying. It's not that easy. So that's one of the reasons why this BTS group is so impressive right now. And let's see. Okay, I got my little screen off the front page here. And so let's see. Nada says, I am thoroughly enjoying this live. Thank you so much for this. So, well, you're welcome. And it sounds like kind of like radical acceptance. Well, okay, I don't know the names that other people have given things. And so I haven't ever heard of radical acceptance. But basically, if you're going to build strong children, they better have defeats and be able to get over them. So in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we had a problem in the U.S. because we had a lot of kids going into soccer, for example, and every kid had to get a trophy. And all the moms were there making sure that their kid got a trophy, whether they were good, bad, or indifferent. And that's almost the worst thing you can do for a child, because we're human beings, and one of the things we have to do is learn by adversity, because life is tough, and we're problem-solving beings. And so children don't know anything. Little babies are wild animals, and you're spending a lot of years learning the ropes of how to be a human being. And one of the things you have to learn to do as a human being is to get over disappointment and move on with the next thing, whatever it is. And this is the same for boys and girls. And so, and you're going to be happier if you do something that your psyche tells you want to try. If it works, great. Keep doing it. Keep doing it as long as you possibly can. If you get defeated, think of a high school football player. Okay, well, I was a high school football player. I weighed 125 pounds. I was in the 10th grade. And the average weight on my high school football team was 195. I'm sorry, it was 164. The heaviest guy on my high school football team was 195. But the average weight was 164, which was on average 39 pounds heavier than I was at the time. And so my father I was playing a linebacker and lineman position. That's what I was playing for in that season. And the football coach lived across the street from us. So one time my dad asked him how I was doing on the football team, and the coach says, well, he's tough. And the reason was that they were handing me these pads to hold up in front of myself, and then the varsity linemen were knocking me down holding this pad. And so I was taking a lot of hits, and it soon became pretty evident to me that I wasn't going to be big enough to be a football player anywhere. And so I had to lament about that. That was a defeat. But I lamented about that, and I went on, and in junior and senior year in high school, I was an actor. And so every play, fortunately, I got the part of the young lover, and so I always got the part that I got to kiss one of the girls, and so that was a big deal for me. and I liked that a lot better than getting run over by football players that were 40 pounds heavier than I was. So that's what I'm talking about. Now, Reezy says, it's from dialectic behavior therapy. I was reminded of it as you mentioned, getting past disappointment. Yeah, I mean, again, that dialectical behavior therapy is some sort of follow-on to what Dr. Jung was saying in the early days. I mean, he and Dr. Freud, he and Dr. Freud were some of the early developers of psychotherapy, and so they came up with theories which later people developed onto. So I'll see if I can mention a couple more key ideas about Jungian psychology. So one of the ideas is that if you have a solid, whatever it is, somebody's going to discern something about that and split it apart. Okay, a very famous example is the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church was very tough for 1,500 years. Anybody that didn't get along with the Catholic Church got burned at the stake. And it was either the church's way or the stake. It wasn't the highway. It was, you're not going to be around anymore. And finally, Martin Luther started the Reformation. So he cut it in half. Now you have a thesis and an antithesis. And almost immediately then, the Protestant side of the church split again into Calvinism and Lutheranism. And so at this point, and it keeps splitting, at this point there are, I'm told, about 400 denominations of Protestantism, and there are 5 of Catholicism. I don't know what all the 5 are, but obviously the Russian Orthodox Church and the Greek Orthodox Church, and I think that there are a couple of others. And so through time, this is the duality of logos and eros. Through time, logos will take anything, and through discernment, it'll slice it into 2. Okay, so now you have a thesis and an antithesis. Okay, you can see that very clearly in American politics right now. We have red states and blue states. So what's the solution? As long as you're pulling apart, you've got a sick country. We have a national neurosis, which is our national politics right now, and we need to find a cure for it. So the cure for a thesis and an antithesis is a synthesis, where we find enough things that we have in common between the reds and the blues so that we can make a purple country. And the problem with that, then, is that as soon as you have a whole that's a purple country, the next thing that happens will be that a discernment will split that apart, and now you'll have a red and blue again. And so what you're seeing is red and blue between elections. On election day, we see a synthesis of the national attitudes of our countrymen. And so on that one day, when the Congress is elected, when the president is elected, we have this purple moment, but immediately that will split into red and blue again. But we do have this synthesis every 2 years on election day. So that's a process that's continually happening in all dualities, in all opposites, as Dr. Jung talked about them. And opposites are absolutely essential to us because it's from those opposites that we have psychic energy. That's what gets us moving. And so there are millions of them in the psyche. I mean, the important ones obviously are male and female, and you know, good and evil, and you know, you could name religions if you wanted to. I'm gonna try to avoid offending anybody here if I can, but in any case, all these opposites exist here. And so our mind works all that around and comes up with an answer, a synthesis. That synthesis comes through a dream or a vision, typically, and that synthesis Dr. Jung called a symbol, because our psyche was developed to communicate with us in images. And so you can imagine the little furry creatures that survived at the time of the dinosaurs, let's say. Those are our ancestors, and there weren't any humans around at the time of dinosaurs, but there were these little furry mammals, and they survived when the dinosaurs didn't. And so from that time, the psyche has been growing up. But those animals at that time, they knew a predator. If they looked up and they saw a Tyrannosaurus Rex, they knew to get out of the way. And if they didn't actually see it, but they heard it coming, they might have in their head a vision of a dinosaur. And I know that that's true because when I was about 6 years old, I was living in Kodiak, Alaska with my parents. My father was a naval officer, so we were stationed there. And we saw a black and white movie that was sort of a precursor to Jurassic Park. It wasn't quite as pretty as Jurassic Park, but it had this Tyrannosaurus Rex that was brought to life. Now, I had never seen any dinosaurs at that time in our development. We didn't have a lot of dinosaur toys around and that sort of thing as we do today. And so for me, that was quite frightening. But that night, or shortly thereafter, within a day or two, I had a dream. And in this dream, I was looking out a window that actually wasn't in my bedroom, but I was looking out this window with a latticed shade like the one that you're seeing behind me here. And I'm looking up, and it's bright daylight because it was, in Alaska, it stays light until 11 at night sometimes. And so it was bright daylight, and out the window, looking up in the trees, I could see one of these very long-necked dinosaurs with the neck that's about 40 feet long, and it was eating the trees and that sort of thing in my dream. Now, I'd never seen a dinosaur like that. And so that image had to be put there in my psyche back at the time of the little furry creatures. Okay, that's when that image was created, because I had never seen anything like that before. So it only came from something inside of me. And so that's how our psyche communicates with us. It sends us images. And when it's emphatic enough, it'll send us a vision in daylight, or it'll send us, you know, a nightmare or some sort of dream. And so that's the way your psyche is trying to tell you something. And your psyche is the boss. Actually, it's your self that's the boss. And I'm going to just look back here and see if I have the, sorry, I guess I don't have the structure of the psyche right here handy. But on many occasions, I've done videos. And in fact, today I just finished this video that is with the AHC, the BTS AHC, which stands for Army Help Center. Now, I got interested in BTS because they've announced that the new album that they're going to drop on April the 12th is named Map of the Soul Persona, and it's based on a book by a Jungian analyst named Murray Stein. I've put some information about Murray in the description down below here, and so far as I know, this is pretty much the first album that's been based on Dr. Jung's work, with the possible exception of Yellow Submarine by the Beatles, but that was 60 years ago, and it was before anybody was really talking about about Dr. Jung. But I have heard that that the Beatles did draw from Dr. Jung's work, but so far as I know, this is the first major album of a very popular singing group since then. And as a result of that fact, suddenly we're going to have young people all over the world, 80 million fans of BTS, believe it or not, around the world. Not so many in Western Europe, India, and the United States, as I learned today, but that's about to change. And so, so we all have to get ready. And one of the things that's going to change is it's going to push interest in Dr. Jung's work out into the general public. And so yesterday, because I knew that and knew that that would be an opportunity for us to try to talk about Dr. Jung's work, and I've been doing that for 3 years on this channel. This is, I believe, the 121st session of this reading group. And so since June 1st of 2016, I've produced over 890 videos about Dr. Jung and his work. And you can find all of those. They're all still active on this channel. And I've tried to categorize them and put them in a way that you can find them. And if you look at playlists that are called JRG 1, 2, and 3, so I'll just put that here for you. Those playlists are, respectively, the playlists that cover the first, second, and third year. And so if you know nothing about Dr. Jung's work, you might want to go back to JRG 1, which is in my list of playlists, and start with the very first video and just listen through them. I mean, there's several hundred hours there, so it'll keep you busy for a long time. But by the time you catch up to where we are today, you'll be well and truly on your way to understanding Dr. Jung's work, and maybe to becoming a Jungian analyst or something like that. Now, I am not a mental health professional, and I go out of my way to make sure that people understand that. But I've been studying Dr. Jung's work for 32 years. I found it very helpful to me in terms of maintaining my own psychic balance. And the reason I started this YouTube channel, one of the reasons, is because I felt it was so helpful that I wanted to help others. And that seems to be the same sort of motivation that is behind the 7 BTS young men. And it's also behind this other group called Army Help Center. So their Twitter handle is BTS _ AHC for Army Help Center _ project. And their idea was that they would make available on Twitter. And that's why in the beginning of this video tonight, I've put all these Twitter handles, because they do it in about 20 different languages. But they are offering a compassionate hearing to anybody who's got some sort of problems going on, either in their family or in their school or whatever it is, with a husband, whatever it is. You can contact this AHC, the Army Help Center, through Twitter. You contact them through Twitter. They will put you in touch with someone in your own language with whom you can talk. Now, this is not psychotherapy, because none of the people that are in AHC are licensed psychologists. However, they are psychology students. And what Dr. Jung and Dr. Freud discovered early on, around the year 1900, or even 10 or 20 years earlier, Dr. Freud was working on it. And what they discovered is that when people were having depression or other problems, if they just talked to somebody about it, sometimes it would spontaneously cure. And in my experience, that certainly works. And you see that happening all over the world, actually. If you go to Egypt and you're driving down the road, you'll see all these men in coffee houses talking to each other. Well, what they're doing is balancing their mental health. And the same with women getting together and talking about their husbands. That's a way of balancing your mental health. And so, but young people particularly, and I'm talking about the BTS fans, may not really understand that. And, you know, most people don't understand it consciously. They just do it. So, you know, when you're in the Arab world and you get to a certain age, you're going to start showing up at a coffee house too. And that's going to work out for you most of the time for your mental health. And if you're a woman in the Arab world, you know, probably you'll start getting together with other women at some point and talking about your husbands. Nobody knows what you're saying about us. Also in the United States, that's the way it works. But it's a way of balancing mental health. And so what I found, though, is that also if you read, and you read in, you know, self-help books generally, but if you read anything of Dr. Jung, very often if you start to focus on it, really focus on it, Dr. Jung's work cannot be read like a novel. But if you study it and try to understand what he's saying and start at a reasonable pace and trust yourself to gradually understand, then it's going to help you also. And it always helps me. Nowadays, if I'm depressed or I'm not feeling good one day, I'll simply pull one of his books off the shelf and boom, in 5 or 10 minutes, I'm feeling better. And I can't exactly explain why that works, but I can tell you that it does. And so I think it's extremely important what BTS is doing. But anyway, yesterday I interviewed 3 young women who are involved in the BTS Army Help Center. And because I was interested in BTS's album, I was looking for someone just to talk to see what they think, whether they know anything about Dr. Jung. Would there be interest in people coming to my website to start to understand about Dr. Jung's work? And I would certainly be happy to help anyone along those lines. But anyway, I thought I was reaching a BTS fan group. And so I started this interview. And as I was interviewing them, I got 5 or 10 minutes in it. And then I realized that these women aren't primarily BTS fans. Their group is about offering a friendly ear to anybody in the world, anonymously. And so if you look back at the very beginning of this video, you can see the placard that I put up where all of their Twitter handles are there, and it shows the different languages that you can reach the Army Help Center. And then you can be connected with someone who will talk to you about anything that you want to talk to. I mean, they up to and including suicide. And so, not that I urge you to commit suicide, but if you're thinking about it, then it would be a good idea to talk to somebody, because suicide's pretty final. And so one of the things that Dr. Jung's point is that we have to live this life. Okay, there's not going to be an afterlife where this consciousness will know anything about what's going on. Nothing ever dies per se. Everything just transforms into something new. And a lot of Dr. Jung's work was about transformations that we go through in our psyche during our lifetime. And we all go through various stages. And so understanding the stages that we're going through and what changes we need to make in order to be better citizens, the better off we're going to be. And so this is why Dr. Jordan Peterson is so important, because he often talks about responsibility. And the point is, when you're an infant, you're a wild animal, and everybody's got to take care of you, and you don't even start to develop an ego until you're about 2.5 or 3, maybe a little older. In Dr. Jung's case, he never spoke until he was over 5 years old. And so he had a lot going on inside his psyche as a introverted intuitive. He had a lot going on. But then when he started to talk, it was in whole sentences. It wasn't just mama and dada. And so anyway, the point is that then the next step is childhood. And in childhood, you're getting educated. You're learning how to be a human being. You're learning how to fit into your culture. And that process really goes on. Dr. Jung's view was that process goes on until you're 35 or 40 to midlife, and up to and including reproducing. In other words, after you have children and your children are coming along, those are all biological functions, because if we don't reproduce, everything stops, right? And each one of us is the descendant of a single-celled organism that lived 3.5 billion years ago. And since that grandfather or grandmother existed, single-celled, every grandfather or grandmother since then has reproduced successfully. Except for you, maybe. Maybe you haven't reproduced yet. In my case, I have. I have 3 daughters and I have 9 grandchildren. So I've fulfilled that task. And, that task for me was pretty much complete at about the time that Dr. Jung said, about age 39, for me. But what I'm observing now in society in general is that people are maturing much faster. And I think that that's a function of the internet. And I think that the BTS young men are a perfect example of that. And if you look at, I put the link to RM. RM is the leader of BTS. His name is Kim Nam-joon, but he goes by the name RM. He was invited by the UNICEF, by the UN, and the UNICEF Children's Fund to come and give a speech to the UN. And he and all his band members were there. And so below this conversation we're having right now, he is linked to his speech. And it's quite impressive. And it's incredibly impressive for a 24-year-old young man. And so that's why yesterday I created a video about individuation. Individuation is one of the major ideas of Jungian psychology. Individuation, okay. And so I read Dr. Jung's definition of individuation into a video yesterday, and then I compared it to what I saw in RM's 5-minute speech and what I know, which is precious little still, about BTS itself. And so that makes them very precocious, very mature young men, and we all have to pay attention to that because that is an important phenomenon. And so now that 80 million fans around the world are going to be exposed to these ideas of Jungian psychology, it's going to be even more important for us to help people understand what's going on. And so if you don't know, every Monday night at 8 p.m., I normally do a broadcast. Usually it's at this desk, but once a month I do it at a local pizza kitchen. That event was supposed to be tonight, but because I've been sick for several days, I didn't want to expose my friends to my illness. So that's going to be next week. So next week I'll be at the pizza kitchen, and my regulars will be running the chat because I normally can't see the chat at that point. But in any case, I'm doing my best to help people get introduced to Dr. Jung's work. As I say, I'm not a Jungian analyst, and I've not been formally trained in Jungian psychology, but I have been studying it for many years, and I have approached a couple of Jungian analysts and tried to get them to do an analysis with me, and at least one of them said she was just afraid of me. She was afraid that I knew more than her. And in the conversation, she admitted to me that she had not read the Red Book. And I said to myself, oh, really? So here's somebody that's holding themselves out as a professional psychotherapist, and she had not read the Red Book. That's really shocking. And so anyway, what I want to emphasize, though, is that this interview I did yesterday, I was looking for BTS fans to just understand the phenomenon, and I ended up instead stumbling into BTS AHC project, which is phenomenal, honestly. I mean, it started spontaneously, and they're offering a compassionate ear to anybody who wants to talk. The 2 people or 3 people that I talked to yesterday that you will be able to hear in the video that I'm currently uploading. Let me see. it's at 93%. So by the time we get off here, it will probably be on the web, on the channel, and you'll be able to listen to it. But what they do is that they provide counseling to people, and they don't charge, and it's totally anonymous. And for young people who are maybe afraid to talk to their teacher or to a guidance counselor or something like that, it sounds ideal. And so I urge you to take a look at that video and understand what it is they were doing. You're going to see how my demeanor changed quite a bit, at least from my perception, during that interview, because at the beginning of it, I thought I was talking to just a fan club, a BTS fan club. And then it turns out that these people are doing counseling light, I guess is what we would have to call it. But, you know, that's often enough. I mean, it's often enough if, especially if you're introverted, if you're a young person and you're introverted, you don't want anybody to know who you're talking to. You can always go to one of these people and they're going to be happy to listen to you and talk to you and give you some ideas about what might be going on in your life. And obviously, ultimately, after the teen years, or childhood, you have to get into maturity. And when you get into maturity as a human being, that means you do have to take some responsibility, and you have to go out, you have to either take care of your children or support your children, whatever it is, and you have to build up your life in such a way that you can afford to live when you're an old geezer like me and you don't have a paying job any longer. And so that doesn't always work out, but that's the objective. So I'm in the fourth phase, which is the Merlin the Magician phase, so I know all the bad things. Anyway, okay, let me go back and look at your comments, and I'm probably not going to stay the full 2 hours that I usually do, because I'm not feeling very well today, but I have already given you an extra hour in that other video, so let's see. So Reezy says, I think it may be a 3-part album series, Map of Soul Part 1, 2, and 3. Oh, that will be very good if that's true. And we'll keep working on it here, because obviously if they're promoting Jungian work around the world, we want to be a part of that, or at least respect it, because then it does help people to understand it. And, frankly, Jungian analysts have been a roadblock. They haven't, they have a profession that pays their income, and so they don't go out of their way to talk to the public per se. I mean, they do have Jungian societies around. And what happens in those Jungian societies is people will give a nice lecture about some basic part of Jungian psychology, like, oh, gee, I'm going to do a weekend on the myth of Demeter and Persephone, for example. And, that's all well and good, because people need to understand how myths fit into our lives. And so there's nothing wrong with that. But basically, I think what those are is intakes into their own practice. But you don't see people trying to get the information that Dr. Jung developed during 60 years of writing and 20 volumes of collected works, getting that information into the public at large. And that's why BTS is so important and so interesting. And that's what I'm doing, because I have no strictures, because I'm not a Jungian analyst and I'm not a mental health professional. I don't have any ethical things that force me not to say anything to any of you about what Dr. Jung was saying. And quite frankly, the last 30 years of his life, he was having some very serious conversations about religion and especially Christianity. And so we may get into, I often do get into that, so there are a lot of videos on that topic in the YouTube channel. But in any case, you know, the Jungian community, the so-called Jungian community, hasn't wanted to talk about it. I finally got one of the older guys, one of Murray Stein's compatriots, to admit to me that they intentionally hid Dr. Jung's information about religion. And they intentionally hid it because they didn't want theologians attacking them in their fledgling profession that was only developing in the 20th century. But because we as human beings don't understand ourselves and don't understand really what happened in the 20th century, and when 175 million people were killed, so for lack of that information in the public, we had some very serious psychic epidemics going around in the world during the 20th century. And some of them are still sloshing back and forth in various societies around the world. And, you know, the U.S. is one of those. And so we have to understand that our public life and our politicians manipulate us in terms of our psyches and what we think about things in ways that, you know, it shouldn't happen, because we should know better as human beings. If we know ourselves well enough, then we know not to do X. But our politicians get us to do X because we don't know ourselves. And so one of the main purposes of studying Jungian psychology would be to know yourself better. That's the main thing. And so, anyway, going on. Miles says, you will find the interview by Paul Vanderklay today interesting. A young woman in her 20s talks about her interest in Jung, very well read for her age. Vanderklay seems to just nod his head a lot. I wouldn't be surprised, because Paul hasn't yet quite grokked it about Jung, and I'm going to send him an email probably tomorrow. I actually have it on my screen here, but because Paul has been doing a great thing, and I don't want to distract from that great thing. Paul Vanderklay is a Reformed pastor in Sacramento, California, and he got very interested in the work of Jordan Peterson. And what he was astonished by was, first of all, Jordan Peterson's biblical lectures, of which there are 13 2.5-hour lectures, which are terrific, and it's the Bible from a psychological point of view. And what Paul was enchanted by was the fact that because people were paying attention to the psychological aspects of the Bible, it was making people come back into the church. And he said when he was in Melbourne last week that he was, he couldn't get people to come back to church 2 years ago. But now, because of Jordan Peterson, it's happening. It'll happen even more if pastors understand what Dr. Jung's fundamental message was, which let's just run through it very quickly since we have a good audience tonight. Basically, from the time Galileo looked through his telescope to the end of the 19th century, the scientific method was punching holes in all the Christian myths. So before 1500, You know, if you were a medieval person, you simply believed the church and everything was about belief, and you never questioned what the Catholic Church said. And, you know, the funny thing is, if you're not familiar with it, you need to look up the abjuration of Galileo Galilei, because he was dragged up before the Inquisition in the mid-15 teens, and he was accused of heresy because he said that the sun didn't revolve around the earth revolved around the sun. And so the Inquisition pulled him in and made him swear on a Bible, kneeling on a Bible in front of the Grand Inquisitor, that the sun orbited the earth. And so he did it in a very explicit manner because he knew that the Catholic Church kept verbatim notes. And what he did was he made monkeys of the Catholic Church for all time, because he explicitly stated what it was that they wanted him to say. And it's very clear that that wasn't his opinion. But he swore in a Bible that that was his position. And so they didn't burn him at the stake. What they did was they locked him up for the last 4 years of his life. And during that last 4 years, he founded 2 new sciences, one of which is quantum mechanics. So, and oh, by the way, he wasn't allowed to look through his telescope ever again, but because he had already blinded himself by looking at his telescope, not understanding that he was burning the corneas of his eyes, he was already blind. But nonetheless, he kind of made monkeys of the Inquisition. But what happened thereafter is all the scientists started to punch holes in all the myths of the Christian church until they simply didn't hold water anymore. And so you got to the end of the 19th century, and Friedrich Nietzsche says God is dead. And most people in Europe believe that. Maybe most people listening to me tonight believe that. But Dr. Jung came along in the next generation, and he found the living God, he found where God lives, and he found how God goes about doing the business of the Godhead. That's not the topic for tonight, so I'm not going to get into that in detail. That requires me in a better condition than I am tonight. But I have talked about it at length in various groups. And we do have an advanced reading group if you're interested in joining that. That meets at 1:30 p.m. Eastern U.S. time every Wednesday. And it's an exclusive group. We ask for a donation of $10 a month to participate. We've done one major book, Ion, with 32 seminars on Zoom, which are all on Dropbox in a private place. And we are currently doing Mysterium Conjunctionis, which was Dr. Jung's last book. So if you're familiar with Dr. Jung's work and you're interested in those 2 books, you might be interested in joining our advanced reading group. And we'll probably find some more books in the future. But if you're not into being in the advanced stage, then just come and ask your questions every Monday night. I'm here from 8 to 10 every Monday night, so we can discuss. So Nada Kebab says, I live in the Arab world and I second what you just said. Sorry, that was so long ago, I don't know what I just said, but thank you for that. And if you want to repeat the point you're making, please do that. And Info says, have you read Dostoevsky? Yes, of course. And Dostoevsky is an amazing novelist who did write from the self. And so I actually talked about that in the interview yesterday, so you can hear my comments on that in the interview, which is uploading. Apparently it's still uploading. It's now processing. It's 18% processed, so I assume by the time we stop, it'll be available. Let's see. Info says he's seeing Jordan Peterson this month. Good, don't take any rules from him. Miles, Jordan Peterson is getting young people who are atheists or evangelical or Catholic Christians to broaden their study. Good, because one of the things that Dr. Jung says is that every religion is a grand system of mental health therapy type thing. And so before there were psychotherapists, it was the religious leaders of every faith that took care of these mental health issues. And there are many. I mean, people get themselves depressed and upset about things all the time, and they always have done. And so somebody had to do it, and for thousands of years it was religious leaders. And it's only in the now 20th century that a new science was developed, psychology, which allows us to see these things from a different perspective. And so one of the important points about Dr. Jung was he was a scientist, but he was not a scientist in the scientific method sense, because what scientists in the scientific method sense do is they solve for X. So, you know, if a chemist wants to prove something about a certain substance, he'll hold all other issues constant and he'll solve for the one thing that he wants to know about. But he rules out any sort of complex system. And the problem with that is that, you know, it helps quite a bit. I mean, it helped to develop the Western world and all of our sciences, but human beings are more complex than that. We have many processes going on all at once, and so the science of psychology requires one to understand all of these processes that are going on all the time, and that's quite a bit more complex. You can't solve for X. And so let's see. So I guess Tor was joking about Morlocks and the time machine. We'll leave that aside. And then let's see. You guys are writing faster than I can read. And Erica says, loved the UN speech. It was incredible. That's Kim Nam-joon's speech, and it is linked below this video. Hello, Alejandra. Steffi says, awesome. Thank you for taking time to discuss this. It's fascinating. Miles, your support of Skip gives us access to the extensive library. He offers a lot of this material free, a modest fee for the advanced group. Thank you, Miles. And also, by the way, if you don't want to make your $10 contribution through Patreon or through PayPal, you can do it right below this chat where the little $sign is. You can put in a super chat, and I will take note of that super chat and treat that as your donation if you want. And then we have to communicate by email so I can get you on the Dropbox. Steffi, or Art says, hi Skip, hope you feel better. Steffi, We are always searching for guidance and questions that only we can answer for ourselves. Absolutely. You can continue learning something new every day, and I do. Brandon, I used to be a loser pothead, decided to get my life together, picked up the hobby of Olympic weightlifting, got a girlfriend, she broke up with me, devastated, starting going to community college for engineering. Terrific. Then got really good at math, physics, and chemistry, trying to be the best I can be. Absolutely. That's exactly how it's supposed to work in your life. And unfortunately, most young people don't know that, and so it takes them years to figure that out. And so if you understand the Job archetype and the idea of going through that cycle many times, then you just know, okay, I got defeated in this. Okay, I'm sad about it, but what am I going to do next? What's the next thing that I should be doing? And then get going on that. Don't sit around moping about it. That's the thing. That's how you grow. That's how you get stronger. What doesn't kill us makes us stronger. Remember that. And Brandon says, I believe it's called individuation. Absolutely. Let's see. Nada says, I guess this will shake both the Jungian community and Army's world. Yep, good chance of it. Steffi, that's great, Brandon. We all want to be best versions of ourselves. And Steffi agreed. And YSL says, that is tragic. I don't know what is tragic. Life is not tragic. Life is an experience, and we are problem solvers in that experience, and we have to learn how to do it. Steffi says, people want to hope. Yes, we have to hope. And sometimes we have to lament, and I often do. And many of those that are here know that I have had many occasions when I went and lamented. But when I do, I know that I'm going to lament, have my cry. It usually isn't a physical cry, but it's the equivalent of that. And, then I move on with my life. That's what I have to do. And so here I started this channel 3 years ago, not having any idea what would happen. And it's grown very strongly over the 3 years, steadily. And now all of a sudden we have a world famous rock band that's taking on this topic. And so inevitably, a lot of the people that are here, I'll tell you right now, we have 35 people online right now, which is more than I've ever had. It's twice as many as I've ever had simultaneously on this Monday evening thing. I mean, it used to be I'd get, it used to be for the first 70 sessions, it was 8 people over at Sammy's Pizza House. But when I started to do it online, I'd have 4 or 5. And lately I've gotten it up to 100. But by the end of tonight, because there are 36 people on simultaneously right this minute, you can be sure that there's the total number of hits on this session right now is going to be extremely high for me. I mean, it's going to be in the 150 to 200 range, which will be a terrific result considering BTS hasn't even dropped their album yet. And so Jennifer says, I have Asperger's syndrome and Jungian psychology is changing my life. I'm delighted to hear that, Jennifer. I'm sorry that I'm not really familiar with the symptoms that you're experiencing with Asperger's. And so you have my empathy, my sympathy. And I'm glad to hear that Jungian psychology is helping you. I'm not surprised. We can talk about that privately at some point if you want. Info says, if I have been studying Jung for 0 months, is it safe to join the advanced reading group? Yeah, because it's only me, Info, And, and we're going through these things as laymen go through them, one paragraph at a time. And we're going to take a year to read Mysterium Conjunctiones. And so there are already 8 sessions that are recorded, and there are 32 sessions of Ion that have been recorded. And so you can listen to all those. And, you know, if you want to drop out anytime, you certainly can. And you can certainly come in and listen. And we have many people who don't know, or who know very little about Jung, but we get through everything because I believe in the rule of the convoy, which is you have to go as fast as the slowest ship. So, and also, there's no place to start in Jungian psychology. Very honestly, there's no place to start. Yeah, you can, what I did for a decade was read peripheral people like Clarissa Pinkola Estes or Jean Shinoda Bolen or Murray Stein's book, you know, but they're not the meat. They're the cheese and crackers that come with the meal. And so if you want the meat, you have to go into Jung. And so, you know, once I started to do that, I mean, I didn't get into Jung at first because I thought his collected works were all about clinical psychology, which is a topic I'm not very interested in. I can't imagine anything worse than spending 8 hours a day getting inside for an hour each one, getting inside the deep unconscious of 8 different people a day, and then having another 8 the next day. And you're always dealing with other people's hardships. I can't imagine a worse profession than that, unless it's practicing law. And I did find that out. I did practice law for 5 years, but I didn't like it. I liked becoming a lawyer, and I liked doing all the writing to get my license to practice law and so on. And then I absolutely detested the practice of law because I was always dealing with other people's hardships. And that's exactly the same reason why I wouldn't become a clinical psychologist today, and why, even though, you know, at various times I've thought very peripherally that I might become a psychotherapist in my older years. After I was, let's say, 55, I started to think about that. But I always said, no, God, what a miserable way to live. And so that's, you know, that's my opinion. But, you know, obviously I'm a certain personality type, and there are other people and other personality types that take it on as a calling. And God bless them that they do, because then we do have psychotherapists. But so I take it on more as a historian and as maybe as a lawyer, and maybe as just an old guy who's had a lot of experience and so now knows how all these things fit together. Reezy says, religion being a form of therapy makes sense. Let go of your problems and give them to a higher power, and there's a divine reason for your suffering, life after death, etc. Yeah, and, you know, I was a deacon in the Reformed Church when I was in my early 30s, and what I knew is that every week when I went to church, when I came out, I felt better. I didn't know why, and somebody could have explained it to me, but I didn't know why. And so I never had a compelling connection to religion. But, you know, if you do go to church and you follow the liturgy, chances are it's going to make you feel better, because that's what it does. But that doesn't mean that it's physically true, okay? And that's one of the fundamental ideas that Jung has in this book, Answer to Job by C.G. Jung. In paragraph 752, he says, every religious statement of whatever kind is a statement of the psyche. It's not a statement of the physis, meaning it's not a statement of the physical world, because if it were, it would be in the books of natural science, and it isn't. So, but that doesn't mean that it's not true, because all of these things, every word in the Bible, every word in the Quran, every word in the Bhagavad Gita is a psychic fact for someone. And actually billions of people in each case. And so those are facts. Those are psychic facts. They're not physical facts, okay? And so they may be physical facts in the sense that the Bible is a history book, and to the extent the history was written down accurately, okay. But if you carefully look, and that's what I started to do when I got deeper into Jung, is that pretty much all the big things that happened in the Bible were either dreams or visions, okay? And that means they happened in the psyche. They didn't happen out there, you know. Yahweh didn't come down and get into a tornado with Job. That didn't happen, the whirlwind. But Job either had a dream or a vision. I don't recall in that specific example. He had a dream or a vision that Yahweh was speaking to him from the whirlwind. And I have no doubt that that dream or vision occurred, none at all. And the interesting thing about Dr. Jung's work is that he went through a period that was very much like Job's. Okay, that's what the Red Book is. The Red Book is his recounting of his personal experiences in the unconscious, in dreams and visions, particularly in visions, and what he called active imagination. And so that was a 5-year period during the 19-teens that ended about 100 years ago. And that book was hidden for 48 years after Dr. Jung's death, and it wasn't made available until 90 years after it was completed, basically, until 2009. And now we have it available to us so we can study it and understand what he experienced. And because I had experienced something similar in 1993 for 8 months, I said, wow, this is what happened when Dr. Jung had this experience. Now I understand. I didn't understand what was happening because, you know, I had this visioning experience for 8 months in 1993, which emerged as a novel. And I put it in my drawer for 21 years. And because I didn't understand it and I didn't know what it meant, now I do know, thanks to studying Dr. Jung. But at the time, it scared the tar out of me. And so I put it in my drawer and went on with my business career. But now, because I've had many visionary experiences over time, I know what he's talking about. And so when in the video that you can find on YouTube, when he was asked, do you believe in God? And he said, I have no need to believe, I know. When I heard that, I said, aha, I know. So now, then I had to ask myself, okay, what do I know? And, you know, it probably took me another 5 years after I first read that before I worked it out. But now I do know. And so what I know from Dr. Jung's work is that the living God exists, that I know where he lives and how he goes about doing the business of the Godhead. And, you know, Paul Vanderklay can't tell you the answer to that, any of those questions. And he needs to, because that's the point. That's the exciting thing about Paul Vanderklay. He sees the connection between psychology and religion, but he can't quite make the connection between the two. And Dr. Jung had a Catholic priest named Victor White, who was a professor at Cambridge, in Dominican House at Cambridge, and who was an author, and who was he was very impressed by Dr. Jung. And around 1945, after the war, when they could communicate, they became close friends, and Victor White used to visit Dr. Jung for about a decade. But sadly, Victor White was killed in a motorcycle accident rather young, and Dr. Jung's sort of rueful comment about it was that Victor White got to within view of the city on the hill, but he never went through the gate. And Dr. Jung clearly did go through the gate, and anybody who knows what I'm talking about knows what I mean by that. But this isn't the time when I'm going to give that homily. You need to go back and read this book. And so let's see, where am I? Got lost here. Okay, so info says thoughts on Alan Watts. I really have none. He was one of the people that was working with the psyche in the late 20th century. He thought highly of Jung. I think Jung I don't think Jung knew about Alan Watts, actually. Maybe not. Alan Watts knew some of the disciples of Jung, but not Jung himself. But, you can't go wrong by listening to Alan Watts. Seagull says, and this is Jay Seagull, so I assume that's Jonathan Living Seagull. Oh my God, I'm at work and I wish I could join this. Will there be any replay for this after this live ends? Yes, there is. All the replays are available from the beginning. Reezy, I think suffering is inevitable in life and you can't stop suffering, but what you can control is how you move forward from that. Like you said, this life is an experience, yes, and we are problem-solving beings, and we have to just think. I mean, you're solving problems constantly. You're solving problems of putting a meal on the table, or you're solving the problem of getting yourself to the bathroom on time, however many times a day you need to, and so on. We solve problems all the time, some big, some small. Tor, MBTI may be easy way in the Jung. Yeah, MBTI is, sort of Jung light, and I have used it for my perspective on psychological types for a very long time. Maybe at the end of this, I'll give you my quick thumbnail sketch of MBTI, but I want to catch up with the chats first. Sean says, my sister has a quote, life is an experiment full of experiences. Absolutely. And Dr. Jung's statement actually was, you have to make your experiment, and life has to be undone. So that means that wherever you sit, there's something that you should be doing, and yourself knows what that is. And so you have to make your experiment. And that's one of the points he makes about Christ, that Christ made his experiment. And the thing that made him the God-man is that when he was on the cross, he said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Okay, because all the rest of his life, he lived completely purely as the Son of God. Okay, and he spoke as the Son of God, and that came directly through his self. But in that one moment on the cross, he showed that he was a human being also, and that connected him and his life to us and our life. We're all crucified somehow. Okay, just let that sink in for a minute. We're all crucified somehow. Maybe we don't get nailed up on a wooden cross, but lots of ways, and we have to learn. And so Christ made his experiment, and he lived it purely. Okay, and he had experiences, and the result was he got through to resurrection. Okay, because there's no one that's listening to this that can say that Christ didn't reach immortality, because we're still talking about him right now. So his spirit is here with us right this minute, as is the spirit of Ludwig van Beethoven or Solzhenitsyn or any of the other people, the greats that have lived in history. Mrs. Go to Forever, I just got my copy of Jung's Map of the Soul. Look forward to learning more of Jungian thought. I'm enjoying your channel too. Thank you. Cindy says, I'm starting to read Jung's book because of BTS, because I am trying to understand. Really enjoying this talk. Well, good. I guess I'm enjoying it okay too, because I was feeling sick at the beginning, but we've almost gone normal session now. Tanzila Khan says, what do you think of BTS HSC's work in relation to both helping people who cannot or will not get professional mental help, and their project BTS AHC Jung, bringing mass awareness of Jung? I think it's terrific, and it does appear, let me just check, it does appear that the new video, which is called Interview with BTS AHC Project, about BTS, that video is now on the homepage of the channel, so you can see more about my reaction to them there, and so there's an hour's worth of an answer for your question, so I'll just leave it to you to go watch that video. It's just fresh on the front page. And Info says, didn't Jung have a dream of World War I before it happened? Yes, he actually had 5 such dreams, and they're covered in the Red Book. And it was from those dreams that he realized that there is a collective unconscious. That was his discovery of the collective unconscious. And so what he said, he happened to have been in Aberdeen, Scotland on the day that World War I began, and when he had the news that it began, he had to find his way home to Switzerland, which was a bit of a trick, but he said on that day he was the happiest man on earth, because he knew that these monumentally apocalyptic dreams that he was having were a prefiguration of the war, and they weren't because he was mentally ill. And so he knew that at that time. See, that's the advantage he had when he went through his visioning period, because he was already a psychiatrist with over a decade and 15 years of experience when he did that. When I had mine come on in 1993, I had no idea what was going on. Prince Nunes says, how much did I miss? Well, you've missed an hour and a half so far, but it's going to be on replay. 5Bug says, dear sir, what word can you tell us as a guide when reading your book? And also, what words can you say to BTS using your book as a basis for their storyline? I have 4 books, so I don't know which one you mean. I'm not Mary Stein, so I didn't write Map of the Soul, but I wrote in 2014, I wrote a book called Political Psychology, New Ideas for Activists, and you will find that on Amazon. You'll find them all on Amazon. And I wrote a 2007 book called Tsunami of Blood, in which I predicted what would happen in the next decade with ISIS and so on, and I was exactly right. And so you can find that. And then I wrote 2 books in my pen name, which is David Garrettson, and those 2 books are called, one is called Seduction for the Soul, which is 50 poems on the subject of seduction, and I wrote a book called Meiko, Memoirs of a Woman, which is a novel about the first woman prime minister of Japan, and it's obviously a novel since there is no such thing. Hello, Penelope. Thank you for being here. It's very late for you. You should watch this in replay. Julia says, hello, I have a lot of new visitors tonight. That's wonderful. And Silent Heart says, Carl Jung believes in God. And my answer to that is no, he doesn't believe in God. He knows. And, you know, we'd have to spend a bit of a time before you understand what he and I mean by that. But, you know, Carl Jung said, I have no need to believe I know. And I found, to my surprise, I had an epiphany at the moment that I saw that, and I found that I know too. And so then I spent the next 5 years trying to figure out what I know, and I think I know a few things now. Julia says, 5 bugs, this is not Dr. Murray. No, it's not Dr. Murray. If you want to go to talk to Dr. Murray, you'll have to wake him up because he lives in Switzerland, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning there, or 3. Info says, the Gulag Archipelago is amazing. Yep, it's pretty scary. 5 bugs says, my bad, I got too excited. Julia, you're good. Thank you. Info says, I think direct proof for a collective unconscious is the archetypal experience of the drug DMT. Okay, that would be your opinion, Info, and I don't encourage the use of drugs of any kind, so I'm sorry. Fi says, dear sir, I got too excited and my bad, and also I will look for your book. Thank you. Penelope, I'm happy to hear you. Yes, I know also. I love that he has said that. I believe I am soul and that there is no separation. Absolutely. Info says, read a really good essay that Dr. Jung wrote on the afterlife, or also called the hereafter. Yep, he did write one, at least one, maybe more. Fi says, how is that? I know God. I don't believe in God. I guess you're talking about you. And what Dr. Jung said is, I'll paraphrase what happened in that section of that interview. He had been a son of a pastor, a Swiss Reformed pastor, so he grew up in the church. And he was asked whether, when he was a little boy, he believed in God, and he said, oh yes, everybody believed in God. And he was asked, did you go to church on Sunday? And he said, yes, everybody went to church on Sunday. I mean, he was talking about what was going on in the early 1880s, because he was born in 1875. And then he says, and now do you believe in God? And he said, now? Well, very complicated. I have no need to believe, I know. And so you can find that clip, just put Jung and I have no need to believe in the search on YouTube, and you can find him saying that. And 5 Bugs wants me to explain how that is. it's tempting since I have 48 people online at this moment, which is more than I've ever had in 120 sessions. I've never had 48 people simultaneously in one of my discussions, but Info says that was in the BBC interview. And Silent Heart says, sir, can you explain some more about Carl Jung talk about persona? Okay, let me answer that. I'm going to then very quickly go back to the MBTI question, and then I'll consider this other question. But so the question on persona is we all have a mask. And so yesterday when the BTS AHC people wanted to talk to me, I had been ill, and so yesterday morning I didn't get up until 10, and they were in Belgium and, in Netherlands and India, and so they wanted to be speaking to me about 10, or no, I guess it was about 9:15, but I was unshaven and I hadn't showered when I got the message, and they had wanted to be going online at about that time. And so I was a mess. And so that's an aspect of our shadow. And so I said, well, I'm only now just seeing this and I haven't been well, so you need to give me 40 minutes to shower and shave, which I did. And so the video that you're seeing is my persona after I went and showered and shaved, but you would not have wanted to see me before I showered and shaved. That would not have been good. And so that's one example of persona. So there's all kinds of examples of persona. Yeah, let me just see if I have one of them here. Just a sec. Okay, maybe this will work. Okay, this is one of my personas. Okay, I'm a retired lieutenant colonel from the U.S. Marine Corps, and when I'm in my Marine Corps persona, I'm a different MBTI type than I am normally, and I am a Marine, as you see, and I still have that uniform, and I wear it occasionally for honor salutes. I'm 72 years old, and I've been retired for 25 years, so I only wear it for honor occasions these days. But that's my persona. But in combat, I did a painting of myself in, this is actually a self-portrait I did from a photograph, and this is me in 1970 when I was 24 years old, and I had just been in a battle. And so, as you can imagine, the officer in the dress blue uniform wants to maintain the persona that everything is dress blue uniform. But the reality of the Marine Corps is that you get about 1 hour in dress blues for every 1,000 hours in the mud. Okay, that's the reality of the U.S. Marine Corps. And so there's nothing wrong with that. That's what it means to be a Marine. But that's a persona. Okay. All right. Now, and Info says, have you ever seen the movie Full Metal Jacket? They talk about Jung in one scene. Yes, actually, that was brought up to me within the last couple of days, and I had forgotten it. I got reminded of it. Of all the Vietnam movies that I saw, and most of them I detested, most of them were awful. And for example, the one with John Wayne in it was so hokey that it really irritated me. But the only Vietnam movie that I saw that I felt was at all authentic was Full Metal Jacket. And so just for my opinion about that movie, I did like it. Okay, going back here. And so all right, Prince says, were Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung friends? They were certainly very close friends for 6 years. And Freud used to think of Jung as his crown prince. But then when Jung didn't accept that the sexual theory was the only way of thinking about the psyche, Freud got mad and took his toys and went home. And so what Freud was about is the material world, and Jung was about the psychic world. That's a quick way of saying that. What do I think of BTS? Well, so far I'm pretty excited about these young men, and I'm very impressed. I'm very impressed with Kim Nam-joon's speech to the UN. That was incredible. And I've put a couple of videos now on the front page of the channel about what I think. So far I'm very impressed, and I'm very pleased to see what they're doing. And Info says, wow, the BTS had a large effect on this live. Yeah, because I thought I was going to be on for like 10 minutes and then go suck my thumb because I'm not feeling well. But here we are. And I have 54 people simultaneously on this video at this moment. So that's really unusual. That's 3 times as many as I normally get. So I'm very pleased to have new people here. Hello, Christy says, hello, Mr. Thanks for explaining in such clear terms about persona. MBTI has always excited me because I can clearly see how it impacts my teamwork, right? And the MBTI is taught in every senior school in the U.S. military, believe it or not. And because it's essential to understand it for proper mission planning. And so I'm going to explain the 4 scales of MBTI very quickly. Okay, introvert and extrovert. The introvert goes to a party and wants to stand over in the corner and talk to 1 or 2 people. An extrovert wants to be in the middle of the party, yucking it up and telling jokes. Okay, it so happens that I'm an introvert, so I'm the guy that's over in the corner talking to someone. Next scale, sensing and intuitive. Sensing is about what you are aware of in the physical world. Intuitive is how you feel in your your deep psyche. And so a sensing person, you can show them 1,000 trees and they won't believe there's a forest. An intuitive person, you show them 3 trees and they'll assume there's a forest. That's the difference. Thinking and feeling. Thinking is the classical idea of the dichotomy between men and women, head versus heart. But in testing in the late 20th century, it was shown that men and women basically fall about 50% on both sides of the scale. So it doesn't mean anything if you're a man and you're F, or if you're a woman and you're T. That's just the way you're put together in your personality. And I was talking about my Marine Corps experience. 95% of all generals and admirals in the Marine Corps are STJ. I am NTP. So that means I have 2 characteristics that are different from people that are the classic picture book Marine. So, but that's just the way I'm put together. But I also had Marine Corps training for 23 years. And so when I put my uniform on, I become STJ. That's my persona. And so I can be an STJ in my uniform, blues or muddy utilities, And in both cases, I'm STJ, and that's my persona. But if I take it off, I go back to being an NTP. Okay, so then the last one is judging and perceiving. So judging people go to the grocery store with a list, and they go up and down the aisles, and they select things off the shelves, and they check off their list. A perceiving person goes to the grocery store without a list, goes up and down the aisles, picks things off the shelves. Both eat. They just go about it in a different way. So that's my very rough cut discussion of MBTI for what it's worth. I've always found that those descriptions is pretty clear, but you'll have to decide for yourself. Art says, this is so powerful that Jung is putting God in a way that you can understand. Absolutely. That's what he does. That's what he did for 30 years, the last 30 years of his career. Phi says, though you aren't Sir Carl Jung, we are lucky to met you. Who can guide us more to his book? Well, I can do a lot of guiding. I have 890 videos on this channel, and I've been doing nothing but that for 3 years. But, there are hundreds of books by Jungian analysts. And, what I would recommend, there's a book, there's a book called Carl Jung's Red Book, Searching for Soul Under Postmodern Conditions. And it's actually a series of 4 books. Volumes 1 and 2 are issued. Volume 3 is due out within the next few days. And the publisher has allowed me to read 20% of those books into my channel. So if you look at the home page of this channel, you will find very close to the top, you'll find a series of videos, and it says Carl Jung's Red Book for Our Time, or Jung's Red Book for Our Time, Searching for Soul Under Postmodern Conditions. Listen to the first 2 videos of that. They're both the first half and the second half of an essay by Dr. Thomas Arst. Dr. Arst is a physicist, not a Jungian officially, although like me, he's studied Jung for a long time. And that is truly a profound essay. If you listen to that, you're going to understand why you need to know more about Dr. Jung's work. And then, there are literally hundreds of books about Jung, and there are about at least 30 major books that are by Jung out in the world. And so, Jungian psychology is not something that you can just read like a novel and then, yep, I got it, I'm going to go on to Nietzsche or something like that. It doesn't work that way. If you start with Jung in any depth, you'll never leave. Okay, that's what I believe. And so I do believe that. I don't know that, but I will assert that. Princess, thank you for your service, by the way. Please stop saying that to American military men. We are thanked constantly. It's getting to be a little bit old hat. And, we are thanked, we are paid, we have honors and so on all the time. And so I'd rather people didn't thank us for our service. I was thanked, and, Hospice of the Chesapeake sponsored the Welcome Home Vietnam Veterans Day 5 years ago here in Maryland. And I actually received the pen from the governor of Maryland when he signed the first bill that he signed. Governor Hogan, he gave me one of the pens that he signed that bill on. And the last 4 years, I've gone to this party, which happened to have been this past Friday. I missed because I was sick, but the previous 4 I went to. So we were welcomed home 40 years later. Well, honestly, I was welcomed home when I came back. I mean, some guys did have this experience of getting spit on at San Francisco airport, but I don't think that was a regular experience. That happened to a few people. It didn't happen to me. And, when I got home, my father-in-law had painted a door, "Welcome home, Skip," and he had put it up over his garage. And so I felt welcomed home at that time, very much so. And so I think we've overdone that. And so Miles says, hang around with Skip for a while. After 6 months, I am seeing how every learning experience, good and bad, every encounter and all the worldviews are circumambulating to the individuating me. Well, that's great. That's the objective. Silent says, thank you, sir, for reading and answering my question. It means a lot for me. Paula says, can we have different personas like the mother, the professional, or just me? Of course we can, and I've been describing that the last few minutes, so if you didn't hear it, you can listen to it and play in playback. Info, yes, yeah, I got into Jung so I could understand Peterson and Heidegger better. Well, it actually works the other way around. You study Peterson and Heidegger so that you can understand Jung better. Bug says, thank you, sir, though we are too importunate. Jerome says, you're in the army now. Yeah, right. By the way, Jerome, thank you so much for your links this morning. I really appreciated those. Julius, hello, I am a longtime follower of Jung's work as well as a fan of BTS. What is the best way of integrating the shadow once you're brought it into your consciousness? Well, if you brought it into consciousness, you're in the process of integrating it, is what I would say. But you want to be sure that you have it in consciousness. And what's normally true is that the shadow is unconscious by definition, and therefore it's a lifetime project to bring it into consciousness. You'll always find some shadow part that you weren't looking at. And someone says, he said he's, just hearts. Hester Gao, where is that? Got away from me. Hester says, have you seen Jordan Peele's new movie, Us? I heard that it was as Jungian elements. I haven't seen it yet. No, I'm not sure I want to see it. It seems to me, I heard that that's a horror flick, and so I'm rather careful of the images that I put in my psyche. But I will go revisit that issue and see what I think. I don't normally go to horror films because I know now from studying Jung that, if you put an image in your head, it's going to be there for a very long time. And so thank you so much for showing much love to BTS. You're welcome. Sir needs to rest, guys. I'm shook and light. I'm so excited for their album. Yes, so are we all. I'm turning in a bit late. Sorry if you already answered I'm turning in a bit late. Is there a fake or negative aspect to Jung's interpretation of the persona? This roles are natural. Well, yeah, there's a shadow in all personas, I would say. And I think Jim Carrey did a movie called The Mask or something like that. You could think of it that way. But, you're never what you present. So when I present myself in a Marine Corps dress blue uniform, okay, I meet the standards of the Marine Corps, and when I'm wearing my uniform, I do everything the way I'm expected to as a Marine Corps officer. But that doesn't mean that I'm exactly the same as a current active duty captain in the Marine Corps, let's say, or a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps, which is what I was. Cindy liked my portrait. Christy, thank you so much for your explanation. I'm actually an ISTP, 30-year-old finance woman. Moreover, for linking it with concept of persona never occurred to me, linking both as I did. Okay, well, you're welcome. Being a finance person as a P, I imagine that's difficult. I mean, I have an MBA in financial economics, and it was always difficult for me as a P. But I've done it, and I have spent years actually at the University of Maryland. I actually, in the graduate school, taught financial economics for a couple of years. Are the different personas conscious creations or breed in society? I would say both. Is it possible for the anima to be repressed forever? Absolutely not. The anima, if you are a woman, Catherine, you're mostly dealing with the animus, probably, unless you happen to have a preference toward anima. I mean, the anima and animus are opposites, and so I don't know where you fit on that scale. Most women fit on the side of the scale where animus rules, and so you would be a carrier of anima for somebody else. So I might project my anima onto you, and so I actually explained this in the other video that was just public on the front of the YouTube channel. So I think you should go over and listen to that video. There's a lot of detail in that. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. You explained MBTI so well. You're welcome. Jasmine says, Penelope says that essay is pure brilliance. Which essay are we talking about? BTS says this is awesome. Prince, I'm sorry. BTS, hearts. Thank you, man. Hearts. Info says, so I'll take your advice and read Jung slowly in small doses to understand it better. Definitely. That's the only way to go. If you read it fast, you're just not going to get anything. You'll just bounce off of it. As Jordan Peterson says, most people bounce off of it because they think they can read it like a novel, and you just can't. BTS Army says, I'm new here. I love psychology and still do. I feel grateful for my fellow armies to get me introduced to such an intellectual man. You're welcome. Thank you. Miles says, Prince Nuna, no need to apologize. You thanked him, and all servicemen. Skip is just too humble at times, I think. Yeah, well, I don't go out of my way to aggrandize myself, but when I show you those images, I'm just trying to explain a point, okay? And I'm not an active duty Marine anymore, and I've been retired for 28 years. So I'm very grateful for my service in the Marine Corps, though, because I got health insurance out of it for life, and I had to have a knee replaced and an ankle replaced, and it was all free thanks to my service. And so that was thanks for my service too. Prince Nuna, let's see. Matt says, thank you for answering my question. I really appreciate it. Excuse my broken English, no worries. Miles says, all servicewomen and men. Yes, absolutely. Miles knows very well about the women in the Marine Corps, and there's even a video about that on the YouTube channel. Penelope says the red book. Oh, yes. The video you suggested on your channel. Okay. So now I have to go back and... okay, yes. Penelope is talking about the essay by Thomas Arzt called Jung's Red Book for Our Time, Searching for Soul Under Postmodern Conditions. It is absolutely probably the most brilliant essay I ever read. And that includes all the essays I've read of Dr. Jung's. Dr. Jung's can be a little opaque sometimes, but Thomas is very clear, and you'll have your mind blown listening to those two videos. Info, yes. Yeah, I have been going on a Jung journey for a while now. Your channel is helping put the pieces together. Great, I'm glad to hear that. Julia, have you listened to BTS music, watched any of their music videos? If so, what do you think about them? Well, I haven't had a chance to watch much. I did watch the promo video for the Map of the Soul Personna album, and that's very impressive. And the idea of the persona is very clearly presented in that, in imagery, and so I was thrilled to see that. And mind you, I've only been really conscious of this happening for about a week, and so I'm doing serious catch-up here, but I'm so impressed by these young men and by the work they've done. BTS says, I pre-ordered the book 2 days ago, still waiting for it, and this genius man going to help us figure out things. Thank you. To the moon and back. You're quite welcome. Info Overdose is a good book to read, Skip, if you are interested in The Divided Brain by Ian McGilchrist. Mentions Jung, I think. Very honestly, I very rarely have time to look at other people's work at this point in my career, because I'm very clear that my path is to stay in the center of Dr. Jung's work. And I basically worked all day yesterday and all day today to get 2 videos done, and I'm still at it, and it's after 10, and so you see how my time gets absorbed. But nonetheless, if any of you approach me, I am very receptive to being approached, and will be happy to communicate with you privately, and I will even give you my email address. That is my email address. So if any of you want to communicate with me privately, you're welcome to. Some of the people you've seen me respond to here have communicated with me for a long time privately as well. And, we've always had a very good group at this Monday night session, which is every Monday night at 8 p.m. Next Monday night, though, my regulars will be sort of running the chat, because I normally cannot see the chat when I'm broadcasting from my iPhone. And so, I will be running a session with my local group members, and you're listening in on that, but I won't be able to see what you're saying on the chat. So I have to rely on my friends to keep that clean and honest. And so Pi says, have a pleasant evening, sir, but I got to go back to work. It's 10 a.m. here. Yes, by all means. And he says, we purple you. Okay, purple's good. It's not red and it's not blue. Info says, thank you for the email. Did you write a book? I think you mentioned. I wrote 4 books, and so you can go back through this video and get the details on those books. And if you are not a member of our general Dropbox, we have a general Dropbox It has many treasures because all of the handouts that I've used for the last 3 years and many other items are included in that Dropbox. But in order for me to get you in that Dropbox, I need a regular email address. So if you send me an email to skip.conover@gmail.com and ask me to include you in the general Dropbox, I will do so. And if you wish to be in the advanced reading group, I will do that too, with the understanding that you're going to make a small contribution of $10 a month. That's not too much to ask, I think. And so this is Go to Forever. Looking forward to tuning in again next week. Thank you. Good. Jasmine says, for us, Army, we purple you, mean we love you. Terrific. Glad to know it. And purple means love within the Army. Thank you, Julia. Matt Wu says, I highly recommend you watch the 7 short films BTS made for their album called Wings. Okay, I will make a note of that because it is evident that BTS is going to be a major moving factor in the Jungian world for the foreseeable future. And as a result, I am definitely paying attention and will go back and spend some time with those. I understand that they've done some pretty amazing things already, which obviously they did. You know, if RM has gotten himself to the UN, I did get an award at the UN once, but a long while ago, back in 2005. Let's see. Matt says, it's filled with Jung references. Great. Alejandro says, purple is the BTS color for heart. We use purple as a verb, and it means we will love you and cherish you for a long time. Thank you. I'm glad to know that. I'll see if I can find a purple heart on my iPhone. Purple hearts mean something different to Marines, but actually they do mean love in that case as well. Info says you guys are giving him too much work. Miles says, Skip, the BTS videos are an ongoing story. You missed a few exchanges above. Yes, I did. Silence says, we purple you means love and trust for a long time. We glad to know you, sir, and I'm glad to know you because I think that what is happening is very, very significant. And I think that what BTS HC is doing is very, very significant because, you know, young people, young kids that are in high school, you know, very often they're afraid to say anything to their parents or ask them any embarrassing questions. And so if they can talk to somebody privately in their own language, anonymously, and get a question answered, I think that that's great. And I think that one of the reasons that Jordan Peterson became so popular is that he has been answering a lot of questions that young people have as they come along. And we now have a couple of generations of especially young men in the United States who have not been properly fathered because they were raised in single-parent homes and without a father immediately present all the time. And so if you're growing up and you're a young man and you don't have a father to answer your questions, what do you do? I mean, it's very difficult. And so I think that Jordan has fulfilled a wonderful need there. And Julia says, I would recommend watching the highlight reels as well if you have time. They do some interesting things involving the anima with that series. There is a lot of symbolism in all their videos. I'm sure there is. I'm very impressed by what I saw so far. Info says, yeah, Purple Heart is if you got injured in the war, right? Injured or killed. But we'll stick with BTS's meaning. Alejandra says, BTS have a lot of content. Take your time, watch the clips and short films at your own pace. I will certainly do that. Nang Asti says, thank you for what you're doing this live. Info, yes, nihilism is a plague among young people. And so the answer to that plague is the Job archetype, to understand that we are transforming, and as human beings, we have to assume a role in the mature world when we grow up. We have to grow up. It's not like Peter Pan, right? And so as long as you go out and try to do something, it doesn't matter what it is. If it's a mistake, boom, you're going to get defeated. You're going to lament about that, and then you're going to be reborn into the next thing. And you just keep doing that until you find the right path. That's what you do. And I've had to do that. I've had to reinvent myself, literally reinvent myself many times in my career. And one time I did found a company that became a public company. And 3 years later, I lost everything in the crash of 2008. So you never know. You might have everything work for you, and then boom, it's all gone. So let's see. And Genesis Pizarro says, thank you for paying such close attention to this group. We are so thankful, since we really appreciate when professionals like you talk with this much knowledge. Greetings from Argentina. Well, thank you. Gracias. And Nung says, you already watched that. Okay. Info, but Book of Job, taking responsibility. Well, it's the Job archetype. It's Job. Job, remember, was the guy that didn't give up on God at all. And ultimately, God rewarded him very highly. And, the thing to understand is God is not some Geppetto who's pulling your strings and is going to get you across the finish line. That's not not the way he works. God is something that puts the power within you to do things. And so when you're praying to God, you're praying to your deep unconscious. You're petitioning your deep unconscious to deliver to you the psychic energy and power to do what you need to do. That's what you're doing. And so if you're going to pray to God and then lie down on the sofa and eat potato chips, you're going to get what you put into it. And so, yeah, it's about taking responsibility. It's about keeping going no matter what happens. Okay, and pretty nasty things happened to Job in the Bible. And, I don't know why that got stopped. Info. But anyway, I've done a lot of video on Answer to Job. In fact, I read the entire book, and that is on the. There is a playlist of the reading of Answer to Job and Dr. Edinger's analysis of it on the front page of this YouTube channel. So if you don't have it, just go listen to my videos. The whole book is there in order. And Nung says, love. Nung says, it's 9 a.m. here in Indonesia. Well, salam, I guess it is now. I should say to you, I'm supposed to work, but here I watch this. Nung, you could always come back and watch the replay. All the replays are in one of those playlists, JRG1, JRG2, or JRG3. This one will be in JRG3, but you can always watch the replays, so don't get yourself in trouble. Brandon says, I have reinvented myself many times in my 24 years. Yes, and very likely you'll have to do that a few times more. Info says, hopefully, when I get more subscribers, can collaborate with other people in Jungian worlds such as yourself. Well, I mean, you can collaborate with me now. I mean, just write to me and ask me, talk to me about how you want to collaborate. I mean, if you're interested in Jung, I'm always interested in interviewing you, and I've started a process of interviewing people for the video. I do it on Zoom, so you can't stay completely anonymous as you are now, but I'd be happy to interview you and point people to your YouTube channel if that's what you'd like to do. And by the way, anyone is free to steal any of my videos, reuse them any way you wish. I have no objections. No objections. And so, you do so at your own risk in some cases, because some of the videos I do readings of copyrighted works, and I do those under fair use exception to the copyright law. So if you're going to copy one of my videos that's a reading of somebody else's book, you should understand what all that means. Julia says, is there a book you'd recommend to young women or just women in general covering the common feminine archetypes? There seems to be a lot of these books for men, but have trouble finding one for women. Yes, there's a very good one, and I will reach over here. I always keep it in arm's reach. This is one of the most important books I ever read, Women Who Run with the Wolves, Myths and Stories of the Wild Woman Archetype by Clarissa Pinkola Estes, PhD. This was a bestseller for a couple of years, and I can highly recommend that. I can also highly recommend two books, Gods in Every Man and Gods in Every Woman. Those are two books by Dr. Jean Shinoda Bolen. And Dr. Bolen actually met me one time, and that is about the major archetypes that we face in our lives, and it's based on the Greek gods, but you can understand yourself by understanding which of these instincts are playing through you, because absolutely you are manifesting some archetype or other that's in the unconscious, and you're manifesting it. And if you read those two books, you'll understand both yourself and your spouse. And so Nung says, I never really know Carl Jung until BTS brought that up. Now I'm planning to learn more about him and his thoughts. Great. I'm very pleased to hear that. Brendan says, advice for young people would be greatly appreciated. I've been giving it right along, Brendan, so ask your questions. I can't speak in a vacuum. And but if you're talking about child psychology, then go look up Erich Neumann, Neumann, Erich Neumann. He was a first-generation follower of, let me give you that on the chat here, and Clarissa Pinkola Estes and Jean Shinoda Bolen. Those three authors are the ones I was just talking about. So anyway, Brandon, ask your questions. I can respond to questions. Jasmine says, how are you feeling right now? I read in the description box you had a cold. Well, my voice is giving up on me. So this isn't going to last much longer, but I'll keep looking at chats for a minute. Info says, all right, Skip, maybe we can set up a podcast or an interview in some future. Yes. Penelope says, a brilliant book. I have it on Audible also. And Julia says, thank you so much for your recommendation. I will definitely check them out. And Penelope's was referring to Women Who Run with the Wolves. That is a terrific book. And as I said in the other video I posted today, I used one of the stories in that book, in this book, which is on, if you have the hardbound, page 74, I believe. Yes. The Doll in Her Pocket, thus Elisa the Wise here. Okay, and so in this story that Estes tells, at the end of it, she explains this in the context of women developing their intuition in terms of how they will live. And so at the end, there's about a 40-page essay covering the 9 things that a woman needs to do in order to leave home and develop her intuition. And basically, I was always thinking of it as her individuation. So I used those 9 steps in my novel. And anyway, every woman that ever read my novel loved it, and I was sort of surprised about that. But anyway, you know, as I was writing a memoir of a woman as a man, I was considering it as kind of an autobiography of my anima, and that's sort of what it is. The novel is all true except for one fact, and that one fact is that there's never been a woman prime minister of Japan, and the names have been fictionalized. But other than that, I can assure you that everything else is true, either as a psychic fact or a physical fact. That says, going to bed now. Thank you so much for your time and patience. Hope you get better. Truth on Lisa Skip supplement with vitamins C. Yes, I've been up to my neck in vitamin C and zinc. Rebecca Sarah says, thanks, sir. I'm going to call it quits here, folks, because normally I cut off after 2 hours. It's been 2.5. And I was planning to go for 15 minutes. So, but I'm very grateful for all of you watching. I really regret having to turn off on, we currently have 45 simultaneous users on this channel, which is nearly triple the highest I ever had before. And so it's very painful for me to turn off the live stream right now, but my voice and body is insisting upon it. So anyway, the way I work is I am often doing readings. Tomorrow or the next day, I want to do a reading from this book, The Structure and Dynamics of the Psyche. And specifically, I am planning to read, just so you know, let's see if I know. Okay, I'm going to read an essay called The Structure of the Psyche. And what I do is I normally read these essays on live feed. I leave chat on, and every 5 or 10 minutes I stop my reading and allow people to ask questions. So if you see me online, you're welcome to join me. But I keep this one time period, Monday evenings, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. typically, available for just general discussion and asking questions. So if you want to catch me like this again, for sure, you can do it every Monday at 8 p.m. But otherwise, I come on when I'm available and when I have time to do it. And let's see. Silence says, "Get well soon, sir. Looking forward for more in the future. I enjoy listening and learning." Sean says, "Thank you. Thank you, Sean. Nice to see you tonight." Sean is one of our regulars. Alejandra says, "Get better soon, sir. Thanks. Rest." Okay, I'm going to stop. So thank you for being here, and I'll see you next week from Sammy's Pizza Kitchen. So it's very likely that Sean and some other people like Miles will be monitoring the chat, but I probably won't next week because I normally can't see it. I'll try, but I usually can't see it. But anyway, you'll be seeing my discussion with my local group. Genesis says, "This was my first live and really liked it. Hope I can watch again soon. Take care, sir. Thank you." Jasmine says, "Thank you." So thank you all. Peace. And there was a guy named Dave Garraway who did documentaries on television back in my boyhood. He must have died 30 years ago, but for about 20 years he did these wonderful Sunday afternoon documentaries, and he would always end his programs with peace. And it's always been very meaningful to me for many reasons. So